Hello everyone, welcome, thank you for joining. So today what we're going to go through is my setup for another Active Directory set. Similar, actually we're going to use the same layout, same IP layout and scheme for our network as we used previously. However, the big difference here is we're going to be building this out, and I'm going to show you how to do the OpenVPN server this time. So to get things started, here's my ESXi box, again running on a NUC 10, and we've got some virtual machines on here, but we're going to focus on building out our OSCP, and we'll deploy a new virtual machine. This one will be OSCP VPN01. It's going to be a Ubuntu box. It doesn't matter which SSD we put it on. I'll go on number 2. And actually, I'll go on number 1. Why not? 1 gig of memory is fine for this. 1 CPU should be fine because it's really not pushing much traffic through it. So here's where we are going to deviate some things. First of all, the ISO, I'm going to install Ubuntu 2204.3 server. And for our network adapter, it's first of all VMXNet 3. This is going to be a public routable, not a public routable. This is going to be an interface that actually is not on the diagram here because the VPN subnet is the virtual subnet dedicated for IPs for the VPN clients. The outside subnet you're going to see, but there's there's an interface here that's not visible, and that is the one that the VPN clients connect to. So the Kali box is going to connect to this interface. That is in a out-of-band subnet. So VLAN 1000 or 4000 in this case, my network. You're going to have to figure out what yours is. We're going to add a second network adapter. That's going to be the OSCP outside. So that is the second interface is this interface. The first interface is not shown, but again is the one that the clients connect to and then get assigned a 172.16 address for the VPN. So first interface is the one that can get to the internet and the one that our clients can connect to. Second interface is our OSCP outside interface. Let's go to next, finish. Power that bad boy up. And let's console into it. And let's get that going. Alright, and I'm going to go ahead and move forward. Let's install, and if you're familiar with installing Ubuntu, this is pretty straightforward. We're not going to do anything fancy here. Ubuntu server. What we do need to do is set our interfaces. So again, this first interface is going to be my outside subnet. So in this case for my network, it's a 10.0.255/24 255.199.1, and I'll give it OpenDNS or the umbrella DNS servers for DNS resolution. So 208.67.222.222. And the second interface is our OSCP outside interface. So that, as you can see here, is our outside 192.168.100.199. So 192.168.100 0/24 192.168.100.199. And no gateway, no name servers, no search domains. We just need an address. And done. Done. We'll go ahead and let it do its little mirror location testing. And done. Continue without updating. And done. Done. And yes, please continue. We'll just use OSCP for our username. This is OSCP-VPN01. And I'm just using OSCP for the username and my super secret password. We will install OpenSSH so we can make it a little easier when we want to remote in. And that's it. We'll go ahead and let it finish doing its install. Alright, and it looks like our server finished installing. So now we can go ahead and say reboot now. And of course it wants to unmount the CD, which is fine. We can do that too. Go up here. And yep. That's not necessary for you, but that's just my preference, is to not have it connect the CD-ROM anymore. Or not the ISO image anyway. And looks like it's up. It generated its SSH keys. So the first thing that we're going to do is go ahead and log in. I like to get root access. And then let's go ahead and let's install our VM tools. So that's going to help get us more stability and compatibility. So we're going to do apt install, yes, OpenVPN tools. Wonderful. Looks like they're already installed. In that case, we'll go ahead and start following the install guide for OpenVPN, which can be found here. And then in this case, we're going to do a quick start guide for Ubuntu. And it should go into your installation instructions for Ubuntu. And it'll probably take you to this portal where you need to log in. And then we're going to choose Linux software, Ubuntu. Oh my goodness, could they make this more difficult? Well, let's not ask that, because they probably could. And this would be where we want to SSH in so that we can do some copy and paste. So let's go ahead and bring that up. SSH, OSCP, 0255.199. Oh, and of course, in this case, it wants us to, let's go ahead and try that again. Yes. And boom, there we go. So now we're on our VPN box. So we're going to go ahead and copy this, paste that in, actually, sudo su, then paste it in. Alright, now let's go ahead and do the second command. It's going to download the certificate here. And let's add it to our repository. And then finally, let's install. Okay, and as you can see, we have finished the install, and oh look, we've got an admin UI, a client UI, and don't forget to make sure you save this admin password before you clear your screen. And if you do need to reconfigure things or configure things manually, you have that option as well. So with that being said, let's go ahead and take that, add it to our repertoire. And we're going to go ahead and log into the server. So we can basically take this guy, and as you can see, you'll probably get a certificate error. That's because, of course, it's a self-signed cert. And again, it's the same URL for the IP address, but port 943/admin. And here I believe it's OpenVPN and then that password. Yes. And I agree. And sure enough, we're good to go. And the free version, of course, you have 2 VPN connections allowed. Now, what we need to configure is the settings for our VPN users. So first and foremost, we need to add a user. So we'll go to user management, user permissions. As you can see, the admin OpenVPN is the only one here. Let's go ahead and add a user. So in that case, we'll say new username, and we'll call it OSCP. Save settings, update running server, and then I'll go into more settings, and let's go ahead and set the password. It's going to be super secret OSCP. And auth method local is good. The only things we really should change in here, well, we'll come back and we'll set a static address to make things a little easier on ourselves. But that's going to be the only thing I believe we need to set. MFA, allow, enable, yep. I think we're good here. So, oh, and allow auto log on. Let's go ahead and turn that on too. Save settings, update running server. Okay, now we can go ahead and go to our configuration and our network settings. Actually, I should say VPN settings. That's what we want to change. The network address range, so this is for dynamic IPs. I will usually set this to a separate subnet just in case I see this come up or somebody uses it. So we can go ahead and use, let's say, 172.16.10.0/24. And for static IP addresses, like we're going to assign for our OSCP user to, again, make our life a little easier, let's do 172.16.11.0/24. And again, that should line up with, yes, VPN subnet. Static is going to be 172.16.11. And group default network, well, we can just make that the same as this, /24. Should the VPN have access to the, yes, but using routing, we don't want to use NAT because that would make our ability to return traffic back to us more difficult. Everything would have to be started by our direction or started by the Kali box. But we want to be able to catch reverse shells, which means we need to use routing. Specify the private subnets to which they'll have access to. Well, that's going to be our 192.168.100 network. That's the only network that they need access to. Again, that's the outside subnet. So let's allow access from these private subnets to all VPN. Yes, so I believe, should client internet traffic be routed through the VPN? No, we don't want to do full tunnel VPN. We just want to do split tunnel VPN. And DNS settings. Do not alter the client's DNS server settings. Yes, do not alter that. We do not want to change the DNS direction. That should be everything that we need. So save settings, update running server. Now that we've set that, and we have our static address range set, we can go back to our user. This is kind of an order of operations. If you try and do the static address first, it won't work. We have to set this range. Now we can go over here to user permissions and OSCP, more settings, and here we can say use static, and we're going to set it to 11.11. Save settings, update running server. That should do it because the overall VPN settings say that specify the private subnets which all clients should be given access to is this, so we don't need to do anything per OSCP user. So at this point we should be ready to test this out. We'll go ahead and test it out with our Kali box. again, I'm not showing you how to deploy Kali. There's plenty of tutorials on that. But we'll go back over here. We'll go ahead and open up our web browser, and we'll go to our OpenVPN server. So that's going to be the 10.0.255.199. Sure enough, we get our certificate error, well, warning. And we'll go ahead and log in as our OSCP user. And here we go, available connection profiles, auto login profile. That's the one we want. So it downloads that. Let's go ahead and give it a test. And blow this up a little bit. Desktop, make directory, AD, lab, setup. And let's go ahead and move. Actually, I'll just make directory for VPN. In this case, we're going to grab the profile and move it there. Okay, and sure enough, our profile's there. So let's put it to the test. Sudo OpenVPN, and we can use our file, or what I like to do, just to make my life again easier, start.openvpn, because we only have one file in there. Boom. There it is. So sure enough, we got the address 172.16.11.11. Shows up here. We can see we have a route gateway, and we can see the net routes have been added, including the route for 192.168.100. So if we do, I think in this case we are all set. We've got the address that we need. We've been assigned these routes. We technically, oh, this is so we can get to our VPN server. 192.16.10. I think that's one of the settings in there. Oh, yep, that was our other dynamic range. So we're all set and good to go. This tests out successfully. Again, if we want to double check, we could also do action split vertically. And if we do route, we'll see same thing here. 192.168.100 is available via our interface on ton 0. All right, OpenVPN is all set and good to go. You can verify again by also going back over here, status, current users, and there it is. Here's the real address of where the VPN client is and the VPN assigned address. And that's it for OpenVPN. So let's get started with MS01. We're going to start building out MS01 because it's actually going to be our method of moving and transferring files, even for the setup stages, between our Kali box over here and DC01 and MS02. Things like our setup scripts or our executables for payloads. This is a completely offline, isolated environment because it's a lab, and also we may be playing with things like malware in the future. So however we build this out, we want to keep it completely disconnected and inaccessible to the outside world. So let's go ahead and create a new machine. We're going to call this one OSCP-MS01. If you've seen me do this in the previous lab, there's nothing fancy or special. We're just going to pick out Windows, where was it? Windows 10 64-bit. This is going to be very similar. Well, actually, it's going to be identical as far as building this piece out. So MS01, we're going to leave these defaults. I joke that I am skimpy on my hard drive space, so you'll notice I thin provision that hard drive. I also like to change the network adapters to VMXNet 3 because they're a bit more compatible and stable in my experience. And then we're going to change this. So the outside interface on MS01 is going to be OSCP outside, and then we're going to add another interface. So we're going to go up here, say add a network adapter. OSCP inside for the second adapter, and make that a VMXNet 3. And then we're going to attach our ISO file, which I pre-stage in my data store. This is going to be Windows 10 1909. finish. And we're going to go ahead and execute that and get it going. Make sure and hit enter or hit a button in time while it prompts you, otherwise you're going to have to reboot it. And we'll get this installer going. And again, nothing special here, so I'll skip through a bit of these easy parts. Next, install. I do not have a product key. Let's go ahead and go full screen. Windows 10 Pro. I accept the terms, even though I'm not going to read them. Do custom install and give me all the space, all 32 gigs. All right, and then we let it deploy the files and install the files. And we'll come back when it's done, rebooted, and at the welcome screen, asking for credentials. Okay, now you can see it's done deploying the files. Gonna restart. Okay, and yep, we're in the United States here. I do have a US keyboard. Can skip an additional layout. I don't have internet. Limited setup. My name is, I like to use delete me, so that way it's easy to identify. It should get removed. No password, so it auto logs in, makes my life easier. No, we don't want device history, and we don't want digital assistant. And I don't need any of this. I will not share, and I will instead try not to send all this extra traffic trying to dial home. And hello, welcome. Okay, and we're at the desktop for delete me. So now let's go ahead and do a couple things. We're going to open up Explorer, right click, properties, well, right click on this PC, go to properties, and let's go ahead and change the name, host name. We're going to change it to MS01. MS01, hit OK, hit close. We're going to restart later. And then let's go ahead and install VMware tools. So I like to eject the existing installer Windows disk, and we'll go up to virtual machine. I'll say install VMware tools. Depending upon what you're using for your interface, you may have a little bit different mechanism for getting VMware tools installed, or OpenVM tools. Alright, and we'll say next and install. And then of course it'll install the video driver, and that's going to make our screen go much bigger. And for the sake of the video, I'm going to increase the zoom from 100% to 150%. That's what I was referring to here. I'll go ahead and right click on the desktop. I like to do display settings and set to 150%. You can keep yours at 100%. I'm just doing this for the sake of making things nice and big and easy to read. And we'll go ahead and say yes, let's restart. Okay, we're back at the desktop. So what's the first thing that we need to do? Well, we're going to want to get our network configuration set up on here. We need to get this thing going on both sides. I should call out, I'll do the attack path and the overall view right after we get the basics done here. So we'll go to, as you saw, I right clicked on the globe icon, open network and internet settings, and then we'll go change adapter options. And then we've got two adapters. So you can right click on the first one, go to properties, disable IPv6, double click v4, hit use the following IP address. And in my case, we're going to be using the 192.168.100.201 for the outside address. 192.168.100.201/24, which is 255.255.255.0, and we don't need a gateway DNS servers. Again, this is isolated. It can't get out. Now we'll go ahead and click OK. And then just to check connectivity, let's go ahead and open up a command prompt, good old CMD. And we can just type in ping 192.168.100.199. And sure enough, we're getting a response, which means we have connectivity from MS01 over to OpenVPN, which is .199. That's our gateway to get back to the VPN subnet where Kali is going to be, where the attackers are going to be. So on that note, let's go ahead and add that route. So we'll say, and this actually, you know what? We have to do that with an admin prompt. So before we do that, we know what our first interface is. We've got that configured. Now we need to configure the second interface. So that's going to be the inside 10.10.1. Again, 201 is the final address, /24. So right click, properties, disable IPv6, double click v4, use the following address, 10.10.1.201. And 255.255.255.0, which is a /24. We don't have a gateway, but what we do have that's different is the DNS server. This is going to be the domain controller, so 10.10.1.200. And that is DC01. Need that DNS resolution for the ability to actually join the domain and do some, well, any DNS resolutions that we need to do internally. So here now we have our two network interfaces set up and good to go. We'll go back, type in CMD, and in this case, make sure and do run as administrator. If you want to be able to add a route to the route table, only admins get to do that. If you type in route print, you'll see we don't have any access to the 172.16 subnet. No persistent routes. Specifically, it's going to be the 172.16.11/24 subnet. So let's go back here. Let's do CLS, clear the screen. It's going to be route add. Oh, and if you're not sure, you can do route /?, and it gives you an example down here. Perfect example. Missing one item that we need to add. So we'll do route add 172.16.11.0 mask 255.255.255.0, and the gateway is going to be the OpenVPN server. So 192.168.100.199. Again, needs to exist in the same subnet that we have an interface in, the OSCP outside subnet. And then we're going to give it a metric. We'll say metric 1, so highest metric. And what we do need to add is a /p for persistence. If we do not add the p, then after this machine reboots, it will lose that route. Persistence says maintain this route even after reboots. Now, we'll clear the screen, route print. You'll see there is our persistent route for the 172.16.11 address. Okay, so that is now set. Let's go back here to our settings. There's a couple things that we need to change. So one is going to be the tamper protection. So let's go to home. Actually, no, let's do two things. We'll do the updates and security. We will go to Windows Security and Virus and Threat Protection, Manage Settings, and scroll down and you'll see Tamper Protection. Turn that off. Tamper Protection, and go ahead and dismiss, basically prevents the ability for things like group policy to turn off real-time protection, and that's what we're going to do later. Now we can go back to Home, Settings, and go to System, Power and Sleep. One thing we don't want this to do is to turn off, thinking it's a workstation that needs to go into power save mode. So set the screen and the sleep to never. Okay. Actually, that takes care of the initial setup and what we need to get done to get this ready. So now what we're going to do is start with creating our custom environment. Let's go ahead and open up Explorer and right click on this PC, go to Manage, and then in here we're going to create our first local user. So local users, right click and say new user. We're going to go with Gale for this one, and let's use a password. Let's open up Notepad here. Let's use something relatively simple. It's going to show up early in the Rocky list, so it doesn't take forever to enumerate. If we're pretending this is going to be the exam, it shouldn't take more than 10 minutes for you to crack a password if you have the right word list. I would say the same thing for if you're going to be doing password spraying. So I believe blue guy shows up relatively early. Matter of fact, let's go ahead and just check that. So if we open up our terminal, and I'm going to actually make this bigger. Let's go here to preferences, change our font size, make it easier for everyone. Let's go to, let's try 13. Nah, let's make it 14. Okay, so in here, if we did grep, I believe it's going to be blue sky, or if we just wanted to look for sky, actually let's do I for not case sensitive. Let's do N for show me the numbers. I want to know which line number is this. Make sure it's early on in the list. We can search for sky within the RockU list. So user, share, word lists, RockU. As you can see, my RockU has already been extracted. If you just opened up Kali fresh, it would still be in the gunzip file and you'd have to unzip it. Oh, that's a lot. As you can tell, there are quite a few entries. So let's clear that. We're going to run the same thing, but just look at head and do -20. Let's just look at the top 20. So here we can see blue sky will actually show up as it's line item 2484. So it should get caught pretty quickly versus if we were to do something even down here at 13,000, it's going to take quite a while actually. Password spraying, doing like 16 threads at a time. It's going to take a while to get up there. So let's run with blue sky, which won't take too long and should be reasonable. Okay, so let's run with blue sky. That way you can see what I'm putting in here. I'm going to just paste that in. We're going to change this to password never expires. Create. Now we want to take Gail and make Gail a member of the administrators, local administrators group. This is just for making our life easier and making cleanup a little bit easier. So we'll actually remove that permission towards the end. So now that we have Gail set up, next thing we need to do is find some compromising software. Better yet, let's actually talk about what our flow is going to be. So at a high level, what we're going to do, let me drop this in here. Actually, you know what? It's going to have to be in here. It's the only way I can copy and paste. Let's open up Mousepad. So here is what we're going to try and do. So the attacker, oh wow, that's really weird. This actually should just be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth. Oh, I see. It's showing the line numbers. So first and foremost, the attacker is going to find the website that we're going to expose. And in there, there's going to be an information disclosure. That information disclosure is going to be the username Gail. From there, we're going to allow the attacker to spray passwords against the FTP service account as Gail. And what they're going to find is blue sky is, of course, relatively high up in the RockU list. And that's going to gain access to the FTP service. Once they do that, they're going to find inside a .zip file. And inside that is going to reveal an installer for potentially what will get enumerated as Disk Boss Enterprise. I found that software to be a good example of some basic shellcode that needs to be developed as well as enumerating what port it's on. The exploit for Disk Boss is going to provide the initial foothold, but you're not going to get an initial foothold as any special privileged service account. It's going to be as Gail. From there, the attacker is going to have to find and exploit a scheduled task to get privesc. Once they get privesc as a local system, they'll be able to do a mimikatz dump and get the cached credentials of Wade, a domain user that had previously logged on to this machine. Now that the attacker is able to pivot, they'll also be able to do rep roasting of DC01, and with the rep roasting, they're going to find Bernie's hashed password, be able to crack that, and at that point, you're going to want to try and figure out how to move laterally. And what will get enumerated is OSCP Wade will have RDP access to MS02. So they'll be able to log in through remote desktop protocol. But just as a normal user, once they're on there, after doing some poking around, it's actually not going to be any type of an exploit per se, but the privilege escalation is going to be noticed once they realize that Bernie, the account that they found earlier, through rep roasting, actually has admin rights to MS02, but does not have the ability to RDP in. So it's going to be you have to get access onto it first, and then from there you'll be able to leverage this account to gain privileges. And you'll notice that when you RDP in, there's a domain administrator that's logged on. And with the domain administrator logged on, once you get PrivEsk, you'll know that you can use Mimikatz to dump that credential and that hash. And from there, it's not going to be a crackable hash, but we'll be able to use something like evilWinRM to pass the hash and get access to DC01 as a domain admin. So that's the overall flow that we're going to shoot for, and that's what we're going to create here. So all that being said, let's get going. So on here, the next thing we need to do is actually transfer some exploitable software, and that's going to be in the form of that Disk Boss Enterprise. We're going to go to our favorite place, which is, well, one of our favorite places, which is ExploitDB. In here, so the way that I find these types of applications to play with is I'll say has app, so I know that there's the app that I can download directly from ExploitDB, the version that I know is exploitable. Go to filters, and in this case, we want to be able to do something remotely, so it's going to be a remote Windows application. And then from here, I'll usually spend some time and just kind of look through some of these, and I believe it's not any of these. You see a lot in this case of remote code execution. You can see these are pretty old publications as far as when these versions were out, and here is our Disk Boss Enterprise 8816. And the reason I like this as a easy beginner level item is that it's not overly complicated. It provides everything that you need. All you have to do is update the shellcode, and that is one of the topics that they cover in OSCP. Not necessarily having to understand how to do buffer overflows, but knowing how to create and identify shellcode and replace sample shellcode that's in here or in exploits that you find. And you'll also notice that this actually has a note here on how to create the shellcode that will be needed, with a few variables that obviously will have to change. So let's go ahead and download that vulnerable app. And while we're at it, a couple other things we need to stage. We're going to want to download auto logon from sysinternals. So let's download that. And let's go ahead and then, I guess in that case, we can just go ahead and open autologon, extract autologon 64 into our download directory, and quit. Okay, and then from here, we can go ahead and close this. Oh, actually, what we're going to need to do is get our VPN profile so that we can VPN in and get connected and transfer our files. So, 10.0.255.199 is my OpenVPN server. Username and password, super secure. Good old OSCP. Download the auto logon profile. And then now we can go back to our terminal. And go ahead and close this, and then from here I'll usually create a folder on my desktop, and I'll say, let's call it AD-setup, and let's make a dir called setup, and let's go ahead and move downloads the profile to our current directory. So we're going to move that OpenVPN profile here. Let's also go ahead, actually, you know what? Just to keep it a little bit cleaner, let's go back to the setup, AD setup folder. Let's create a folder called VPN. Let's move that profile to the VPN directory, just to keep it a little bit cleaner. So if we do tree, you'll see we've got the setup folder and then VPN folder with the profile inside there. Let's now go ahead and move the other item that we want, which is our downloads and the auto logon 64. Let's move that to the setup directory. And at this point, what we can do is go ahead and go back to VPN, do sudo OpenVPN, and that's fine. Okay, so when this gets connected, we'll see we get our 172.16.11.11 address, and now we can transfer files from Kali over to MS01. The way that we're going to do that, I'll open up a second terminal, go to our 80 setup and setup folder, and I'll run mpacket smb server, smb2 support, and we'll create the share called setup and share the current directory. And it's ready to go. So now we should be able to go over here and we'll go to whack whack or backslash 172.16.11.11. Sure enough, there's our setup folder. There's our auto logon. Oh, and actually what we forgot to grab and move over there. Let's go ahead and kill that. Let's move, download, I believe it was, yeah, there's our disk boss setup enterprise to the current directory. And now let's go ahead and run our mpacket server again. Now when we go back, we refresh, boom, there's both of our files that we want. So let's copy those, go to the C drive, create a new folder, let's call it setup. Let's paste those files in there. And let's go ahead and install Disk Boss Enterprise. Next, I agree, yep. Next, and finish. And it should open up here momentarily. Oh, there it is in the background. And you'll see here it's connected. So we are good to go, but we are going to make a change. So this currently runs as a service. We're going to right click and go to manage. We are going to go ahead and go to services, find our Disk Boss Enterprise service. There it is. And again, you'll notice that logon, it's set to runs the local system account. We're going to change that to Gale. So if you just type in Gale, hit check name, it'll fill it in for us. And then let's change that to Blue Sky. Password we had set for Gale. Hit apply, and it'll say the account Gale has been granted logon as a service, right? Okay. And it won't take effect until we stop and restart. Well, guess what? We won't know if our password that we typed in is correct either until we restart the service. So let's do that now. Perfect. Okay, so now that that's running, and it's running as Gale, I'm going to close that out. We're going to stage this later on with some exposure. So let's go ahead and change the name of this to just Disk Boss Enterprise, so that way we can reveal. If you look at the EXIF data for this, go to properties, details, you'll notice there's not much of anything here. So unfortunately, there's not any EXIF data that can be scraped to identify what it is. That's why we're going to keep the name relatively descriptive, including the version number. It should make it fairly easy to find when you're looking for applications that might fall under that name and versions that might have exploits available. What we need to do next is verify if that port is open. The port that this one uses, I believe, was 8094. Let's go ahead and double check that. So we'll stop our SMB service, clear the screen. Let's just run sudo nmap pn for no ping. Let's go to 192.168.100.201, port 8094. Let's see what that comes back with. Filtered. Okay, so we need to make an exclusion on the firewall. So let's go back. Let's go ahead and just type in firewall. Here we can say, there's a couple ways to do this. And you can do it through the command line. You can do this through the GUI. I guess for the sake of doing this, I will show you the GUI. So here I would typically go to advanced settings because I want to be very explicit. Go to inbound rules. And here, if we take a look, you'll notice you can organize it by local ports. And if we look down here for 8094, let's flip that. Any. Oop. Here's our 8s, no 8094. So let's go ahead and say new rule, port, because that's really what we're going to be opening and concerned about here. TCP 8094. Allow the connection on all of the locations, and we're going to say, we'll just call it disk boss enterprise. TCP 8094. Finish. Okay, now when we go back, bingo, it's open. And that means we should be all set. So let's go ahead and close this. Close this. Okay, so now we need to provide a way of exposing information. And to do that, we're going to do it with Internet Information Services, providing web services and FTP services. So if we, I'll just go here and I'll type in programs and features. And here we can say, over here, programs and features. Turn on Windows features, or turn Windows features on and off, and here's IIS, Internet Information Services. So if you just click on that, it'll automatically include the web server, it'll automatically include the IIS management console, but what it misses is the FTP server. So click on that, so it includes the FTP service also. Then click OK. We'll let that install. And now let's go ahead and hit close and close and close this. Now what this did is it automatically created a folder here called inetpub on the C drive, and you'll see your triple-dub root and your FTP root directories are there. If we click on start and you scroll all the way down, Windows admin tools, now you have a new addition called Internet Information Services Manager. Let's open that up, and in here, expand that out, you'll see sites. There's our default website running on port 80. What we're going to do is we're going to also add, so right click on sites and say add FTP site, and we'll just call this FTP. And it's going to ask for where's the root path or the root folder. So we're going to make it C drive inetpub FTP root. You already made the folder for us. We're just going to use it now. Click on next. Leave all of this. We can change. We don't want SSL. We don't need SSL encryption, so we'll turn that off. And all unassigned addresses means it's going to listen on all interfaces on port 21. And here's where we actually want not anonymous. We want basic authentication. So this is going to be used for password spraying and helping us to identify what the password is for Gale. And we're going to say all users. And they can have read and write permission. That's fine. Okay, so that just created the FTP site. So now we have an FTP and we also have a web server. Let's check those ports and make sure that they're open and listening. So let's go back here. We can hit up and let's change our port to port 80. Sure enough, that's open. And we can even do a curl 192.168.100.201. Look at that. Default IIS page. And now let's also check 21. And sure enough, it's intelligent enough to add port 80 to the firewall, but not 21. So what we need to do here, go back to our firewall that we closed earlier. Windows Firewall. Let's try allow app or feature through Windows Defender and hit change settings. I feel like FTP is in here. It is. There it is, FTP server. So if you check that box, it'll enable it for public, check it for private as well, and then go ahead and hit OK. That should have opened up the FTP service. Or maybe not. Interesting. Okay. In that case, let's go ahead and go to advanced settings like we did before. Inbound rules. And just for giggles, let's go over here, organize it by port again. Let's go down to the 2s. Here's port 21. There's 2 rules for port 21. Interesting. Let's go ahead and enable this one. Let's see if that, because one's set for private, the other one's set for domain. Shouldn't make a difference in this case. And sure enough, it doesn't. So we're just going to add a new rule to supersede both of them. Just say port, just like last time. TCP, port 21, allow the connection, all locations, and we're just going to call this FTP allowed, and we'll say TCP 21. Finish, and what do you bet? That solves the problem. So, okay, good to go there. Good to go here. So at this point, now we're ready to start putting some actual payloads in there. One thing I like to do to keep it easy, let's just overwrite the default IIS page. What we're going to do is our information disclosure. So we can leave the IIS PNG file, that's fine. What we are going to do though is overwrite the IIS start page. To do that, we're actually going to have to open up command prompt as administrator, because this requires admin rights, and then I will run notepad, C drive, inetpub, www root, IIS start.htm. So we're going to open that up with notepad and admin rights. So now I can highlight everything, delete it, do file save, and it will let me save. I've got some code here that I think will make a lot, I can reuse it and it'll make things a little bit easier. So I'm going to copy this out. And we're going to transfer it over to our Kali box, which will then allow us to transfer it over to the MS01. So I'm going to say nano IIS start.htm. I believe that's what it is. Yes. Paste in what I have for my template. Save it. And let's do good old mpacket SMB server again. Go back to Windows. Back to 172.16.11.11. Setup. There's the new page that we want. Let's just open it also in Notepad. And we can just highlight, copy, paste, save. And we should be done. Let's check it. Let's test it. Actually, you know what? We can check it from here. Did our good old curl command earlier. Let's do it again. Beautiful. That's our template. And if we check it from this host, let's go new in private window, HTTP local host. And there's Gail's blog. Okay, so now we've got our information disclosure for the username. Next, what we're going to do is we need to create our exploitable service, which is also going to create the .zip payload. It's kind of a twofer here. So I said exploitable service. I meant exploitable scheduled task. So let's close this and let's start with creating our task. So let's go back and let's go ahead and say notepad. Well, actually, we're going to do this as Gail. This is going to be Gail's task. So here's the way I'm going to do this. You can do this differently if you please. I'm going to say run as /user Gail cmd.exe because I want to do all of this as the Gail user. And Gail's password. Sure enough, there we go. So if I say who am I, I'm Gail. Now we're going to go ahead and let's go ahead and navigate to Gail's directory. So C users Gail. I want to go and hide this, not too hard, but just a little bit. So we'll say app data local. I'm going to make a directory called scripts. And let's go ahead and use Notepad to create a backup.bat file. Yes, we want to create this file. So now we're going to use this because we can use a scheduled task to run a batch file. Let's go ahead and actually let's call at echo off so it doesn't echo PowerShell. This is going to be a PowerShell command because last I checked there's no native way to create a zip file with built-in tools on Windows in the command line, command prompt, but there is a way in PowerShell. So it's PowerShell compress archive, and we're going to actually say update, so that way it doesn't create a new one every time. It'll just say, oh, is there anything that changed? Let's just update the .zip file. The source of this is going to be actually the setup directory because that's where our disk boss installer is. So we'll say path C drive setup /*, so all the contents inside. And then where are we going to send this? Destination, whoops, can't spell. Destination path is going to equal C drive inet pub FTP root, because that's where our FTP is going to be, and we'll just call it backup.zip. Man, I'm having a hard time with the keyboard today. Okay, so that looks right off the top of my head. Let's go ahead and save it. File save. And most likely will fail because you need admin rights. But let's go ahead and run it and see what happens. Should give us a little PowerShell. There it was. Perfect. Access to the path is denied. Okay, this is what I'm expecting. This looks good. If we wanted to test it, we could just change the directory and say, here, create it in your current directory. And that should work. Sure enough, there's our backup.zip file, and we're just going to go ahead and delete that. And Control Z and save. Okay, so this looks good. Now what we want to do is open up Task Scheduler. So I'll say Task Scheduler. Let's see. Actually, what's the file location? I'm just curious here. Task scd.msc. So we could say task scd.msc. And that opens up Task Scheduler as Gale. So when we create this new task, it'll also be as Gale. You can do this in the GUI. I prefer to do it in the command line. So let's go ahead and do that actually. It's going to be schedule tasks, create, and then SC for the time. It's going to be, we'll go by the minute. How often? Let's do it every 3 minutes. It's pretty reasonable, and I would expect the OSCP exam to be running something automated about every 3 to 5 minutes that we would be exploiting, so you don't have to wait too long. The name is going to be FTP backup, and then we can do /tr. So tr is going to be what's the action we're going to do. What we're going to run is the C drive users Gale app data local scripts backup.bat. Now, yep, looks like I got that correctly. So it added it. Now when we go up here and we say refresh, sure enough, there's our FTP backup. Now the thing that we're going to change, we don't actually want this to run as Gale. It shows that it was created by Gale, but we don't want it to, here it shows the author, MS01 Gale. We actually want this to run as our privilege escalation mechanism. To do that, we're going to have it run as system, NT authority system. And we'll even say run with the highest privileges. I'm not sure this is required, but just for the sake of being thorough, we're going to enable that. Okay. It'll also ensure that it has the permission to access the FTP root directory and create that zip file. So here it shows the last run result, 0x41303. It hasn't been run yet. Let's go ahead and run it. what we're expecting is that it should come back. Let's go ahead and refresh. Yes. Operation completed successfully, 0x0. If it was 0x1, that would indicate an error. And we can check it. If we go to here, C drive, inetpub, FTP root, boom, there's our backup. We go inside, there is our auto logon and disk boss files. So we'll go ahead and close that. In the long run, actually, let's go ahead and delete it just for giggles. It's going to run every 3 minutes, so it'll automatically recreate as needed. So we now have our ftp.zip file that's going to be exposed. Again, it'll just get auto recreated, and when we do our cleanup, we're going to get rid of the auto run file. So it'll only be the disk boss file that's inside there. At this point, I think the last thing we need to do is run the auto logon to have it auto log on as Gale. So let's go ahead and go to this PC, C drive, setup, auto logon, agree to the terms, and here's where you can say let's auto log on as Gale. The domain is the local machine MS01 and blue sky. Hit enable. If you had the wrong password, it would give you an error, so we know that's the right password. And just for giggles, we can go ahead and restart. And it should auto log on as Gale. We'll double check, but that's it. MS01 is ready for now. We're going to come back when it's ready to be joined to the domain. And now we're ready. We finished MS01, now we're ready for DC01. So let's get things going. Create a new VM, new virtual machine. Again, this is going to be pretty similar if you've seen me create DC01 before. So we'll call this OSCP-DC01. It's a Windows machine. We'll say server 2016 or later. Next. Give it a drive to install on. 2 CPUs, 4 gigs. Hard drive, we'll say thin provisioned. This will be on the OSCP inside. I like to change it to VMXNet 3. And then let's give it the ISO to install with, which in my case, I'm going to choose 737 build for Windows Server 2019. Finish. And let's kick it off. And let's go ahead and go full screen. All right, next, install. We're going to do standard eval desktop experience, so we get the GUI. I accept the terms I do not read, custom install, use the whole disk, and go ahead and start deploying your files. And we'll come back when it brings us up after the reboot for asking for administrator credentials. And sure enough, just as promised, here we are. So in this case, I'm using the theme of Elemental, as it's a movie my kids seem to be completely obsessed with lately. So let's use, for an admin password, something that's not going to be in RockU. At least I don't believe so. Let's use fire, water, 1, 2, 3. And just to make sure that that's actually not in RockU, let's go ahead and double check. So we can do grep. Sure enough, there's where we had it before. Let's search for, we do not want case sensitive. I'm interested in the number though. Fire, water, 1, 2, 3. Not in there. Okay, so we're good. So this will not be a easily crackable password. It's going to need to play past the hash. All right, let's go ahead and unlock. And just like all of the other machines, the first things that we're going to do is actually go ahead and set the host name and install VMware tools. So we'll say configure this server, click on the computer name, hit change. We're going to call this DC01, hit OK. then OK, close, restart later, hit Windows Explorer, this PC, my personal preference, I'll just eject that CD, and then I'll go up to my menu and say virtual machine, install VMware tools, and double click. And sure enough, here is the installer. Yes, next, install. Let's go ahead and move this stuff down. I can close that. And of course, once it installs the video driver and gives us our 1080p, I will increase the zoom. There we go. Right click, desktop or display settings, 150%, just my preference for the video recording, and then we'll say finish. And yes, let's restart. All right, get logged back in. So next, as usual, we're going to go ahead and configure, we'll go ahead and say hide here. Right click on the network, open network and internet settings, change adapter options, and then right click, properties, disable IPv6, open up IPv4, and we're going to configure this as our DC address. So this guy, 10.10.1.200. And don't need a gateway. We are going to set a DNS server. It's actually going to be itself, the loopback 127.0.0.1. The reason for that is because as part of our upgrade to adding domain controller capabilities, that's going to include a DNS service. So this is good to go. And we can go ahead and close this. And at this point, what we can do is actually we are ready to promote to the Active Directory domain services. So let's go up here to manage, add roles and features, skip this in the future, hit next, next. Already got DC01 selected, hit next. Here's where you're going to add on Active Directory domain services. Go ahead and hit add features, next, next, next. Check the box to restart automatically, yes, and install. It won't need to restart, at least it shouldn't, but just in case, we'll let it do it automatically. And then we'll go ahead and let this finish installing. Okay, and now that it's finished, you'll see there's the option here, promote this server to a domain controller. Let's go ahead and click on that. And we're going to say add a new forest, oscp.lab. At least that's what I'm going to call mine. You can call yours whatever you like. I'm going to set the directory services restore mode password, DSRM, to the same thing as our admin password. So fire, water, 123. Next. Here's where I was referring to the DNS. Go ahead and hit next. It'll do that automatically. The NetBIOS here, it's looking to see, does anybody already have OSCP as a NetBIOS name on the network? Because if so, we can't take it. Nobody responded with they have it, so that means we now have it to take as our option. Yes, we're going to take it. Here's where it's going to ask to store the uber secret, our I guess the crown jewels, so to speak, our NTDS and the NTDS data and sysvol. So we're going to save that to the default places, which is in the Windows directory. Real world, you may try and secure that in other means, but defaults here are perfectly fine for the lab. And later on, we may even do some attacking of NTDS. That's always a nice attack vector. Okay, all prerequisite checks are good. Let's go ahead and hit install and let it do its thing. When it's done, it's going to automatically pop up and say that it's ready for a restart, and it should restart automatically as well. And sure enough, there's that where it says you're about to be signed out because we installed domain services. You can click close or you can just leave it. It will automatically reboot here momentarily. It's just letting you know out of courtesy. And there it goes. Okay, so now we're getting logged back in as the admin on OSCP.lab. And now we'll be able to go up here to tools and we'll see that there's things like Active Directory, users, and computers. This is fantastic. This is what we need. So here we can open this up and see OSCP.lab and the users. And sure enough, there's a bunch of users in here. Well, actually, there's a bunch of groups in here and only a couple of users, administrator and a disabled guest account. So what we're going to do is create a few users, but you can do this manually. It takes a little bit of time. What we're going to do is just basically run a quick PowerShell script. So I've got this, well, I've got a template anyway that I leverage. We'll go ahead and copy this over. And again, since I can't copy directly into my Windows domain controller, I'm actually going to copy over to my Kali box and then transfer it to MS01 and then transfer it to DC01. So what I'll do here, open up my, actually I think I already had a command. We already got a shell open here. Nano, let's call it adusers.ps1. Let's go ahead and paste in my save. So here we're going to create users like Ember, Wade, Bernie, Cinder, oh that's funny, Claude, Fern, Brooke, and Harold, all from the elemental. And here you can see their user principal names. And if we scrolled all the way over to the right here, you would even see things like their passwords. So we'll take a look at that in a little bit when we open it up so you can see the passwords I'm using. And I also made notes that, hey, two of these are in RockU because they're going to be crackable. The rest are not in RockU, so they're not going to be crackable. Well, at least not easily. So we'll save that. Do our good old impact at SMB server. Then we'll go over here to MS01. Open up Explorer. Go to our 172.16.11 setup. Grab our 80 users. And then we can actually just drop it into our C drive setup directory. And then, actually, you know what? I'll copy it from there and let's go directly over to DC01. See if it pops up and asks us for credentials. It does. Wonderful. So in this case, we can say we want to log on as the domain administrator. And fire water 1 2 3. And because we are logged on as the domain admin, we can go to the C $share. Here's the C drive. Create a folder, call it setup. Drop in our 80 users PS1 file. So there, it's good to go. We can close that. And let's go ahead and go over to DC01. Here you'll be able to see on this PC, C drive, setup. There it is. Right click. And actually, you know, we'll just say edit so you can actually see the contents here. So here you can see I've got these passwords. So the two that are crackable that are in RockU is Seawater and Fireplace, and those are for Wade and Bernie accordingly. You can use your own passwords if you like. Go ahead and close this. If you want, you can take kind of a screenshot. Here's the usernames compared to the passwords if you really want to emulate or replicate and do this exactly. So we'll go ahead and grab all that. Actually, you know what? We are running this as administrator, so we should be able to just hit run. Oh, it doesn't like complexity requirements. Okay. So when it does things like this, let's go ahead and see what it created. I'm going to clean this up for a second so we can run that again after we make a change. Right click, refresh. Look, oh yep, so it disabled some of these ones that it didn't like those passwords. So we're going to go ahead and delete these ones. Harold and Wade, right click, delete. Okay, what we're going to need to do is actually modify group policy first. There's a couple group policy things that we need to do actually. So if we go here to group policy management, run as admin, here is our group policy for the domain. And here you'll find that there's a default domain policy. And in here, settings, it'll generate the report, show you what settings have actually been changed. Security. So here you can say, hey, we don't trust that site, and just add it. You can hit show all, and it shows you all the settings that are explicitly set in this group policy. The ones that we're going to change are these password settings. So we're going to right click, say edit, go to computer config, policies, Windows settings, security settings, account policies, password policy, enforce password age, uncheck it, hit OK. Max password age, uncheck it, hit OK. It's going to automatically clear the minimum password age. The min password length, that's fine. Password must meet complexity requirements, disabled. Let's go ahead and close that. Minimize that because we're going to come back to it. And let's open up a command prompt. And we're going to type in gp update / force. That's going to update the group policy to the changes that we just made. Then we can go back and run our PowerShell script to create those accounts, and we won't get any of those problems with complexity requirements. All right, we're updated. Let's go back to our IDE, and let's go ahead and say run. And look, no errors. And when we go back to group policy, Active Directory users and computers, refresh, bam, there's all of our accounts. So from there, we now have the accounts that we need. We just need to weaken one of them, which is going to be the Bernie account, and we're going to make him rep roastable. The way you make them AS rep roastable is you'll open up the account properties, we'll go to account, scroll down to the bottom here, and do not require Kerberos pre-authentication, which means you can query this without having any credentials and get the hash. So you can get a hash for free, so to speak. So now Bernie is now rep roastable. Let's go ahead and close this, go back to our group policy, and we're going to create a couple of new group policies. Let's go ahead and right click, say create a GPO in this domain and link it here. We can call it OSCP GPO. Hit OK. There it is. Right click and edit. It doesn't have anything set. It's basically an empty blank template. We're going to go ahead and expand policies, Windows settings. Oh, actually, administrative templates, not Windows settings, Windows components. And then we'll go down here to Windows Update and open up Configure Automatic Updates, disable it. And if you come down here and read, you'll see that if you disable it, basically means we're not going to look for updates. You want to install updates, you got to do it manually. The other thing is we're going to do the Windows Defender antivirus, real-time protection, turn off real-time protection, enable that. It's kind of a counter positive, so to speak. That's enabling to disable. Okay. Good to go there for our group policies. So at this point, our domain controller is all set. And now we're ready to go and focus on MS02. All right, let's get our MS02 started. Create and register a new VM. Deploy the virtual, or actually create new virtual machine. We'll call this one OSCP-MS02. And this will be Windows 10 64-bit. Give it a data store, 2 CPUs, 4 gigs of memory, thin provisioned hard drive, just my taste. OSCP inside for the interface, and our host device, well, our ISO is going to be mounted. In this case, I'm going to do a different build. I'll do 2004 for Windows 10. Oh, wait, actually back. One thing I want to change is the network adapter as well to VMXNet03. Finish. And let's start that puppy up. And we can go ahead and go full screen. Okay, and here we'll say next. Again, basically the same flow as before. I don't have a key. Windows 10 Pro. I accept the terms that I do not read. Do a custom install. Take up the whole hard drive space. Let it bake, and we'll come back when it's rebooted. And sure enough, here we are. So it's asking about region, United States for me, US keyboard, don't need any additional layouts, I don't have internet, continue with limited setup. It's one of the differences in the builds. I'll use the good old delete me user account, no password, so it automatically logs me in. Don't try and dial home to share all this data. No, we don't need device history. No, we don't need Cortana. And hello. Okay, and here we are at the desktop of MS02, and you're never going to guess what we're going to do. We're going to change the host name. You're right, you guessed it. So we'll go ahead and say change MS02. Restart later, because at the same time, well, I guess not the same time, but right now we're also going to install VMware tools. Then we're going to let it reboot. And double click. Yes. Next, install. And I'll right click on the desktop, display settings, scale, let's go to 150%, and finish, and yes, now we're going to restart. Alright, now that we're at the desktop, let's go ahead and let's start with, actually all we really need to do is disable tamper protection, or more like verify. Let's go, before we do that, let's go ahead and turn off the screensaver and the sleep. And then we'll go here to security. I believe in this build, when we go here to virus and threat protection and manage settings, when we go down here to tamper protection, okay, yep, need to turn that off. Dismiss, close, close. And at this point, we're actually ready to join it to the domain. We're going to need to use the auto run for auto logon later. So let's go ahead and create that setup folder. And let's go ahead and copy that over from MS01. Here's a funny thing. Since MS01 and MS02 both have delete me accounts, if we try to go to MS01, oh, yeah, it's going to say no. Oh, actually, that's funny. Oh, it's because we haven't joined the domain yet. Let's just double check our settings here. We did remember to configure our DNS server, right? Oh. Okay, yep. Skipping ahead. So that was the one thing I missed. Right click on the network and go to network settings. Jumping ahead. Let's go down to change adapter options. Right click, properties, disable v6. See, I've done this so many times I forgot that I didn't do it. Double click on v4. Use the following IP, 10.10.1.202. Because again, that's going to be MS02 right here, .202. It's going to be a 255, 255, 255, and our DNS server, which is what led me here in the first place, is our DNS wasn't set. It should be 10.10.1.200, the domain controller. Okay, okay. And so now, when we want to try and copy something over, they're not part of the domain, so we'll have to go by IP address, 192.168.100.201. Dang it, that's the outside. Darren, what are you doing? Whack, whack. I'm trying to hit the outside from MS02 on the inside. It's 10.10.1.201. 10.10.1.201. It's probably going to just deny us. So what we can actually do is, since we already built out DC01 and we kind of did this earlier, we can use DC01 as the staging point, because really the only thing that we need is just the auto logon file. And if we do DC01, it should pop up and say, yes, ask for credentials, administrator, firewater 1, 2, 3. And because we're the domain admin, we can go to $. And the setup folder, which has the 80 users right now. What we can do is go back to MS01. Again, we're still logged on as the delete me account. Open up our C drive. Go to setup. Copy auto logon. And then go to / DC01. You'll see it's still saved in there. I'm actually still have credentials saved because we were setting this up a few minutes ago. Setup and paste. Go back to MS02 and sure enough, copy. Go to the C drive, setup, paste. All right, so now we have that file that we need. We're ready to join this to the domain. So let's go ahead and right click on this PC, go to properties. We can hit change settings here, hit change, and now we're going to select domain oscp.lab, hit OK. Use that administrator, domain admin with the firewater 1, 2, 3. Welcome to the domain. And restart. Okay, and now that we're part of the domain, it doesn't automatically log on, so we're going to go ahead and hit OK. And sure enough, we're back at our desktop. Now what we can do is set up the little intricacies. It's not going to get too complicated. So what we need to do for MS02 is provide the method of initial foothold, which is RDP. And we're also going to need to provide the level of privilege escalation, which is going to be having a privileged account that's a local admin on here. So what we need to do is modify, actually first let's add Bernie to the local admin group, because that's going to be the local admin we use for privilege escalation. So if we right click, say manage, right click this PC, say manage. And in here we can go to local users and groups, and open up administrators. You'll notice there's automatically added in the domain admins. We're going to say add. It has oscp.lab by default as the location to search. So here we can just type in Bernie, check names. It's going to say, hey, we don't recognize you, delete me. You need to give us some credentials to actually scan and find which accounts exist. Administrator, as well as you need to have local admin rights to do this. So, and it's going to be our firewater 1, 2, 3, and there it goes. It was successfully authenticated, auto checked, and populated Bernie. So now Bernie's going to be a local admin. We're also going to add a remote desktop user. That's going to be the initial account used for the foothold, which is remote desktop, and in this case it's going to be Wade. So same thing, hit check names. It's going to pop up and ask for credentials. And there finishes populating Wade. Hit OK. Great. Now, technically, the problem here is that Wade and any local administrators will be able to RDP like Bernie, but we need to deny Bernie that access. We need to force them into using the lower privileged account. And the way we do that's going to be, in this case, through group policy. So actually, let's do MMC, run as administrator, Microsoft Management Console. We can do file, add, remove, snap in, group policy, object management, local computer. So we're going to modify the local computer security policy. In here, it's going to be computer config. And if I remember correctly, Windows settings, security settings, local policies, user rights assignment, and there should be a, yes, deny logon through remote desktop services. And we can add Bernie. Same thing, hit check name, authenticate again. And now Bernie, even though he's a local admin, is going to be overridden by this deny policy and group policy that says you cannot log in with remote desktop protocol. So that will supersede the local admin rights. A deny will supersede a permit. Now what we need to do, and we don't need to save that console, we can close that, is actually enable the remote desktop protocol, enable remote access. So right click on this PC, go to properties and remote settings and allow remote connections, and then turn off network level authentication. It's an additional layer of security that requires network authentication before you can RDP in. We're just going to turn that off. We don't need that. I've noticed that in the OSCP environments and tests and material, that tends to be something that is off, but it could be on. I've seen some practice materials where that is, some practice boxes where that is actually network level authentication is on and you have to use that. So at this point, RDP should be on and should be allowed, but let's double check because again, I don't want to miss and we want to make sure that the port's open. So let's go ahead and open up the firewall network protection. Notice that we're on the network or domain network. Allow an app through the firewall. And then let's just scroll down and see if remote desktop it does look like it's enabled. And I guess another way to double check is since we're on MS02, we can go back over here to MS01 or even DC01. Let's use MS01. And you can type in remote desktop, open that up, type in 10.10.1.202, hit connect. And if it pops up and asks for credentials like this, that means it's listening because it responded and said, yes, I'm here. Who are you? So at that point, we're good. We know that this is working. At this point, I think we are ready for just the level of cleanup that we need to do on MS02 and the final piece, which is logging on the domain administrator. Ooh, don't do that. Don't do that in production. But let's use auto logon. I agree. Administrator for OSCP.lab and use our credentials here and say enable. All right, now that auto logon is set. And let's go ahead and double check by restarting. And that'll allow us to then do the final piece, which is deleting the delete me profile and the delete me account. All right, and so now we're at the desktop. Notice that the zoom is set back to 100% since we're logged on as a new user. The first time we've logged on as the domain administrator. So let's right click. In this case, I'm going to say display settings and change it to 150% so you can see. And we can go ahead and click on Windows Explorer, right click on this PC. Let's go to properties and advanced system settings, and here we have the user profiles. So these are the cached profiles on here. You notice delete me's here taking up 345 megabytes. Let's delete that. and hit OK, and hit OK, and then we can go ahead and close this, and now we can delete the delete me account. So we can right click and say manage. We're logging on automatically as the domain administrator, so we don't have to worry about losing any local privileges. We're logging on as the domain admin. We got full privileges. So go ahead and right click delete me and say delete, and OK. And that's it for MS02. We are staged and exposed and ready for attack. Okay, so let's get MS01 joined. We can go ahead and start cleaning this up as well. So we can go to setup. We can get rid of our 80 users. And we can right click on this PC, go to properties, change settings, change domain OSCP.lab, and then log on with the domain administrator account. All right. And OK, and close, and restart now. Now this is back up. It doesn't automatically log on, so we're going to continue to auto log on with delete me. That way we still have local admin rights for now. Let's go ahead and actually, you know what? Let's use auto log on now. So C drive setup, auto log on, yes. Gale, and let's set the Gale's password. So again, put that in. Enable, oh, wrong one. Yay. Okay, restart again and make sure it auto logs on as the MS01 Gale account. All right, since we're logging on to a new account, Gale's not logged on before, it's going to ask us about all those privacy settings again. So I'll turn all that off. Same thing here, I'll change the display settings to 150% so you don't have to squint as hard. And click on start, verify, sure enough, we are logged on as Gale. So at this point, we are ready to remove things like the auto logon.64. Let's go ahead and shift delete that. See the inet pub FTP root. So currently has the backup in there. Let's now go ahead and start to revoke some user information. So let's right click on this PC, go to properties, advanced system settings, user profiles, and let's delete the delete me profile. And click OK, and OK, close that. And now let's right click this PC, go to manage, and local users and groups, administrators. Oh, actually, let's go here to users, right click delete me and say delete, and yes, and OK. And just for cleanliness, let's go ahead and clean up that FTP root and .zip file. So, oops, the inet pub FTP root, right click and shift delete. So it does a permanent delete there. It'll get recreated obviously when the scheduled task runs. Make sure the recycle bin is empty. And now we're ready to just double check. Yeah, now we're ready to open up the administrators, groups, administrators, and remove Gale. Sorry, Gale, you lost your admin privileges. And the last thing that we need to do is click on Start and Gale and switch user, because what we're going to do is cache another domain user's account. So we'll click on other user. Notice it already says sign in to OSCP, and in this case we're going to sign in as Wade. And we're going to use Wade's password, which if you don't remember was seawater ! That is also going to be found in RockU. So that's crackable. Doesn't have to be crackable. We could potentially play past the hash with it, but in this case it's going to be crackable. Because again, the expectation here is this is entry level. This is one of my first attack paths of just getting comfortable with a lot of the basic tools and methodologies and flow of what I felt was going to be the most successful way to approach the Active Directory domain set. Okay, just for fun, I'm going to go ahead and set the display settings to 150%, but this is all we needed. We just needed to get Wade logged on so that the credentials are cached. We'll say power and restart anyway, because we just want to clear that up and have it ready to be attacked. And it's going to auto log on back as Gale. And at this point, MS01 is all set because everything that we did was under the delete me account, and that was intentionally because when we deleted the delete me user profile, it cleared all of the stuff from the history that we had been doing, at least as far as what we need to be worried about. The last thing we need to clean up though is the Kali box. So typically what I'll do here is, you can shift delete to permanently delete like the AD setup folder I was using for staging. Go up here, let's close out of our consoles. Actually, let's kill this one. And then what I'll do is something like mousepad and the home directory /.zsh history. Have that open up. Yep, that's what I'm looking for. And actually I think the flow here is because we still have the shell open. I'm going to go ahead and close this. And I'm going to say exit here so I don't have any more prompts open, any more shells open. And I'm going to go ahead and open up mousepad again. Do file, open recent, and there's the history file. Control A, delete, save. That's it. So now when you go to open this up, you'll notice that there you hit up, you hit down, it doesn't have any history of the commands. You could type in IMP for impacket. It doesn't have any history of any impacket commands that you ran before. So this machine, let's go ahead and do one other thing, which is clear out the Firefox history. So history, clear recent history, everything. Make sure it's all checked. Clear now. Goodbye. It's gone. And restart. Let's go. We're ready to rock.